So, good morning and welcome to a special edition of the Daily Energy Markets podcast here from where are we? We're in Singapore. We're at APEC here, the S&P Global Commodity Insights annual gathering in Singapore. And every September, the great and the good of the energy market stakeholders, at least a good number of them, except the ones that are on this podcast, of course, but the rest of the great and the good are here in Singapore at the APEC and at the right across Singapore APEC, the Platts APEC conference. Of course, only one of multitude events taking place here. But let's kick off this morning with the survey question that asks where the group is at with what has been the sort of news this morning out of APEC here, that Platts APEC conference forecasting $10 drop in Brent crude oil through the fourth quarter, which is $10 from where it is at the moment. That's a big number. That brings it down into the mid 50s. Your thoughts, everybody, if you want to vote on that. Let's kick off, as always, Monday morning with our quarterback, Omar Najia, derivatives trader at BB Energy in Dubai. Omar, your thoughts of the news over the weekend and where Platts are forecasting oil prices to go now through the fourth quarter, ending up, by the sounds of it, in the mid 50s by the end of the year on Brent.
Oh, I love it. I think basically that everybody should be selling. If you can get kind of mortgages for your house or your car or whatever it is, do it and go short the oil market. Because I tell you one thing, the US fiscal dominance and basically money flows have nothing to do with oil. It's all about this forecast that basically we're going to drop $10. And by the way, it's not like 9.75 or like 8.32. We're going to drop exactly $10 into Q4. It reminds me of that quote where basically if you're playing poker and you're sat at the poker table and you don't know who the sucker is, you're the sucker. So, I mean, I don't know who comes up with this stuff, but honestly, I disagree completely. I think the dominant theme in markets right now is fiscal dominance in the US. I think the Fed's going to cut. I think they're going to cut big. I think basically whether they cut 25 or 50 is not the point. The point is that they're going to continue to cut. It's going to be a big cycle of cutting. You've seen what the job number revisions have done, basically. And I think every single market is going to roof. And the reason it's going to roof is basically there's going to be a lot of liquidity come in. And if you want to measure any commodity, but specifically oil, in anything, or even in US dollars, it is in US dollars basically adjusted for inflation. You measure it in gold prices, you measure it in the price of a Big Mac, you measure it in the price of Apple stock. Oil has never been cheaper. So yeah, no, I don't think we'll be selling it.
Michelle Weiss-Bachmann, Senior Maritime Intelligence Analyst at Windward. Your thoughts on that thesis, Michelle, and we'll get to sanctions after that. But the general health of the market, what are we seeing in the shipping lanes? Are rates, tanker rates, looking solid? Lots of oil moving everywhere? Or are we softening? Does the shipping sector concur with this idea of greater weakness in the oil price and in demand ultimately?
Good morning. Well, so far, I'd have to say that tanker freight rates are quite solid. They have been buoyant by many factors, not so much the health of the oil market, but of course, a lot of other geopolitical factors. And increased oil on the market and lower oil, cheaper oil, is always going to particularly benefit the very large crude carrier rates from the Middle East Gulf that ship primarily to Asia. So this is seen as good for freight rates and for the tanker market.
It does seem, Michelle, one of the narratives here in Singapore today that the strength of the market in the first half of the year and into the third quarter has been the exceptional amount of Chinese buying for inventories that the crude tankers going into China have been consistent, but going into inventories, but that's to drop off. Are we seeing any of that in the shipping rates?
Not as yet, but yes, inventories, especially in northern China, are reaching record levels, and that's primarily on the back of the intake of a lot of Iranian crudes, US sanctioned Iranian crude, and also China has stepped up and increased its imports of deeply discounted Russian crude as well. And so I think also to add into this equation with the additional oil coming to the market from OPEC, you have to remember that you have behind this the threat of snapback sanctions being at the UN, and also overnight we had Donald Trump talk about secondary sanctions being imposed on Russia. And of course, that's a combined, roughly 4.5 million barrels of oil per day, which is under some form of uncertainty and sanctions uncertainty. So that should be injected into calculations too.
Chouaib Boutamine, energy advisor and CEO of Ranadril Energy from Algeria. Chouaib, speaking to Omar's point here, we are seeing oil prices up today, gaining back over $1 of what they lost last week when this news first broke that OPEC Plus was going to be increasing supply again into the fourth quarter, but recovering some of that loss today. Why is that?
Yeah, good morning, Sean. I think, first of all, I think we were not really expecting that OPEC Plus is taking that decision to unwind more than 137,000 barrels of oil per day by October. By the way, let me open the bracket. In the last April, when the OPEC decided to increase unwind production by 137,000 barrels, they are coming back to the same number, and it's like 130. They started 138, and now they are in October launched another unwinding of 138,000 barrels. So I think it's a strong signal that this one could be the last unwinding of the year, because as we know, the Q4 demand is not really strong, and we are at the end of the driving season.
Yeah, but on that logic, I mean, OPEC Plus did start in the spring increasing supply by a very small number. I think it was in April, and then in May they sort of put on the turbo drive to 3 months of that. They could do the same again. I mean, that was the weakest window of the year, the second quarter.
Yeah, but I think that in the second or third quarter, we were, let's say, in the summer, the demand was really strong. It's not really the case at the moment in the Q4. And we know that we have some geopolitical issues. We have negotiations are running at the moment between the US and Russia. And we know that United States is imposing tariffs of 50% and threatening to increase them against India if it keeps buying discounted Russian oil. I think we have new factors are acting now in the oil and the global oil market. So I think that taking that decision at the moment is not to respend, is like to recover the market share. It's also
yeah, but yeah, go ahead. Also.
Yeah, it's also to make stability among the group of 8. We know that Iraq and Kazakhstan were all the time not respecting the quotas delivered by the OPEC Plus. So it's a double, let's say, a decision for let's say to recover market share and to respond to the calls of some few members of the group to increase their production levels.
Omar, just so I'm clear understanding your position here, you're seeing the price recovery bullish going forward based on liquidity rather than demand. Can you just sort of parse those two things?
Okay, so basically let's go by demand. If you look, some people will give you like 2026 demand from now, right? So how they do that?
Yeah, we saw it today. A lot of it being
it's astonishing. So basically, they have demand from every single country and every single product already from now for 2026. If you believe that, then basically, I have a unicorn to sell you, right? Put that aside. What do we know? We know basically that PMIs across the globe went up in August. What does that
But
mean?
you said PMIs or EMIs?
PMIs, purchasing
P as in Peter.
managers.
Yeah.
P as in Peter, right? So they're all going up. What's that telling you? You have basically increased economic activity. That's one. You look
Future
at basic,
confidence.
yes. You look at basically equity markets, all-time highs. What's the Fed want to do? Cut, right? So the economy's running hot. What does the Fed want to do? You're on train's basically going at like 100 miles an hour and you're putting more coal into the engine, right? What's that
Well,
telling
the
you?
train derails, no?
Well, eventually, but not just yet. That's the whole point. It will at some point, but it has to keep going quicker and quicker.
In the meantime, hold on by your fingernails.
Absolutely. So if you look at all that, there is no way that you're going to get any kind of recession, because any kind of recession would simply be catastrophic for the US with its debt situation. You're going to get the US monetizing its debt, debasing its currency. And how do we know? Look at the spending that they're planning to do. Their deficit is going to end somewhere between
That's clear.
$2 and
But
$3
what
trillion.
isn't clear is that oil is joining the party, because ultimately this narrative has been around a while, right?
Yeah,
We've seen equities double or more than double since COVID. Oil has kind of stuttered on the sidelines. Why will oil join the party now?
Because at some point it has to. It's like trying to keep that cork underwater. You can do it. You can keep saying, Trump can keep saying, we need oil lower, we need this. He can say to his friends in OPEC, announce you're going to, 500,000 today, announce before the weekend that we're going to bring more to the market and all this kind of stuff. And what's the price doing? The price, since basically we had that fall to 55 basis WTI on the tariffs, the price wants to rise. It's not going to be able to be held back for a multitude of reasons, from inflation to the real price of oil in any other kind of measure. The fact that basically economies everywhere are going to run hot because they need to, because the fiscal, dominance in the US means that they need to keep spending, they need to keep borrowing. And because they need to keep borrowing and because they're paying so much in interest, they need rates down. Same is true of the entire European, the entire EU. Same is true of the UK. Okay, so basically the idea that somehow you're going to get a slowdown and oil is going to fall $10, I mean, I pray. I hope it does, because it'll be the buy of the century, but let's see what happens. Today, the market is looking at that $10 down forecast and saying, oh, here we go the other way. So let's see.
Michelle, you mentioned earlier sanctions and the threat of more sanctions, and the boy who cried wolf, Trump on his master Putin. You're tracking the shipping lanes very closely every day of the week, the dark fleet. We're hearing here in Singapore this morning that the dark fleet is actually growing this year, not shrinking. These sanctions are all hot air, empty balloons, aren't they? At the end of the day, they're meaningless.
Well, absolutely. The dark fleet has expanded, I would say, if you exclude maybe some of the government-owned tankers, maybe 900 plus vessels. You've got 20% of internationally trading crude tankers are now under some form of Western sanctions. Has that impeded the flow of oil to buyers in China, Russia primarily? No, it hasn't. We know from looking at that sanctioned cohort of tankers that nearly 60% are flying what we call false flags. That is, they operate entirely outside international rules-based order.
So is this now a new normal? Or is there a consequence of this? I mean, this is going on for a long time. It's been tolerated for a long time. India's getting a slap on the wrist at the moment. Is there a consequence of this scale of dark fleet? What is it? What are we not seeing? What are the powers that be are not seeing that they're not taking action?
Well, I think the consequence could be $1 billion oil spill, quite frankly. As I've banged on for years now. The dark fleet's an accident waiting to happen. They're anonymously owned, they're elderly, they're poorly maintained, they have no insurance, and if they do have insurance, it's invalidated, especially if it's a false flag ship. In Northwest Europe, it's of particular concern. All of those tankers that are sailing to Russia to load in the Baltic and then are sailing through the English Channel, through the Mediterranean, they have under, under United Nations conventions, the right of innocent passage. They're unchallenged. The issue is also quite pertinent for Singapore and Malaysia because you have about 80 at any one time tankers that are used for floating storage and ship-to-ship transfers out in the Raoul Archipelago. It is of huge concern, but of course, it is something that's that regulators are having an enormous time coming to grips with.
Joy, but looking at the point you made earlier about the idea that this OPEC Plus decision is based on keeping harmony within OPEC Plus. But the reality is that, Joy, that very few OPEC Plus countries, including Algeria, can add any more barrels. Everybody's already at full capacity here. That's probably why oil prices are rising today. Where can the new oil come from?
Yeah, but few members have more capacity. UAE, for example, Saudi Arabia, Kazakhstan, Iraq, they have capacity to increase more barrels, to pump more barrels to the market. And I think what's really happening now in the global market is that we have a fierce competition out of the group. So we have to remember, just give you an example. Brazil, for example, in the last July, it increased its oil and gas production by 23% compared to the same period of the last year. So in last July, Brazil production of both oil and gas, let's say, increased to 5.2 million barrels of oil equivalent. So this is threatening the market share of the OPEC. I think that's why OPEC members, especially the group of 8, are accelerating their pace toward to increase to let's say to hold that market share. And if there is a market share is available, they say, okay, we are cutting they were cutting 5.85 million barrels. So now with October, with the ending of October, they will reach 2.46 million barrels per day, which is representing only 64% of the group of 8 in Windig, which is 3.85. So for them, the group of 8 especially is a question of how to hold the market share and how to recover, especially recover 3.85 million barrels of oil
The market
per day.
share for who, though? Whose market share? Because obviously, okay, you mentioned 4 countries there that could maybe increase. I'm not sure where Iraq and Kazakhstan, because they were already overproducing their quotas. So I don't think they get too much to do. But what about everybody else? I mean, how does that create harmony if only Saudi Arabia and the UAE can increase real barrels and everybody else can say, oh, I'm happy because technically we're more market share, even though I can't increase? I mean, it doesn't seem that is a harmony. Where is the harmony coming from?
Yeah, the harmony is to satisfy Kazakhstan, because before, for example, Kazakhstan and Iraq.
I thought it was about punishing Kazakhstan and Iraq.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's that's part of making harmony and say, okay, punishing them, yes, but it's creating a harmony to saying, you have to respect the quotas we allow it to you, and everybody has the right to take that market share. So I think what's really happening exactly now is they have the OPEC members, they want to take market share and they make that stability in the global market. So just give you an example. United States, for example, at the moment is looking to increase oil production, but it's not really has the capability. The global market is very tight at the moment. And I think now,
well, the rig count in the US is way down, and production is more or less flat. If you could trust the data, that's another factor in the world today. Can we trust the data? Let's go to the survey result and see. We went with early survey question today so we could get a result up. We have disagree 2-1, disagree 2-1 with Omar Najia. Omar, I have another question for you from the floor here in Singapore today, and that was tackle it. One of the reasons OPEC plus, or sorry, Platts had made this forecast, a few reasons. One was the fact that they're looking at the demand growth this year, 2025, and in recent years, but this year, last year, and they're identifying that actually what is defined as crude oil demand growth actually includes a lot of NGLs. They're not actually crude oil, and that the crude oil demand growth only makes up about half of the forecasted numbers. So, for example, Platts itself has a 700,000 demand growth forecast number for 2025. And of course, we're 3 quarters into the year, so it's not really a forecast anymore. The IEA has the same number, but half of that number is NGLs. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, half of that number could be, I don't know, marshmallows. But basically, honestly, how do you actually count that? I mean, I've seen article after article, all this stuff where they tell you that, the production is this much and the supply is this much. It's just estimates and guesstimates. And then somebody comes up with it, and then the other guy says, yeah, I agree. And then the other guy iterates it a little bit and says, maybe 3%. So they take a line, right? And then they basically add little dots, 3 little dots, because they keep the line where it is, and they say that's how we estimate demand. But in reality, they talk to nobody. They don't actually call up and say, hello, China. So tell us, what do you think your demand is going to be for next year? They don't do that. It's just basically guesses. All this stuff that we see. I mean, if you're looking at data,
but that's not new, is it? I mean, that's not new.
No, that's
ultimately.
not new. That's. I mean, supply and demand started from like the
apparently the CIA,
the
DCIA was the first one that did demand forecast.
With sheep, supply and demand is like a picture that's fixed in time. The world has moved on from supply and demand. It's all about macro. It's all about like moving pictures in color. But you can think. I mean, I don't want.
So what do you do? What do you do with low? What do you do with low data, low jobs numbers that came in at the end of last week? That typically that tells you that economic growth is under duress. I mean, that's typically what it's meant to say.
Yeah, absolutely. But you also got to understand that Trump is doing this on purpose. He needs cuts. So he's firing everybody who was giving the numbers in the first place. Then he's massaging the numbers to kind of come out so he can do it. So the markets are worried that all this data, Fed independence, numbers independence is all going belly up. So in the old days, you used to be able to rely on data and iterate and all this kind of stuff. Now it depends. You wake up today, there's a new tariff. You go to sleep, the tariff's gone. It's all become binary, zeros and ones. There's no kind of, iterate and demand is going to be this. And you know what? I mean, honestly, this.
I mean, it is quite suspicious that last week everybody in the market was aware that the job data number was really weak before it was published on Friday. And that typically is a number that is quite confidential. I mean, it did smell a bit. Michelle, looking at your earlier point about where the softness is in this market vis-a-vis the 80 tankers or whatever might be at any given point parked just in front of me here. I can barely see them if I could see around the corner of the Raffles Mall here. But the fact is that there's a lot of floating storage now. If there's that many tankers wandering around sitting idle in these parts of the world, they all have oil on them. What volume are we talking about of the kind of crude oil from sanctioned countries that would be sitting on these dark fleet at any given time and not getting to their destination? I mean, we're hearing that 40% of Iranian supply that leaves Iran is not actually arriving in China.
Well, that's true. The Iranian to China logistics chain is very inefficient, but I think that that's more a product of finding a way to get it in undetected rather than than any sort of demand picture. Although we do note very high inventory levels in China, and I think there was some import levels that came in with crude, and definitely demand growth in China has slowed dramatically this year. So I would say, let's say there's about 80 I think I mentioned earlier, very large.
Yes, at any given time.
Yeah, at any given time, I would say maybe 30 to 40 of those would be storing crude. And the reason I'm vague in the numbers is because these vessels are often dark. They've turned off their transponder. They spoof their location. That is, they manipulate their IIS to say they're in one place when they're really in another. And we don't really have any visibility on those ship-to-ship transfers. We only really see those ships when they begin to sail for
So
China.
that speaks to Omar's point. Ultimately, this is another very dark, I mean, dark literally in the sense that the data, I mean, never mind the data that's meant to be accurate and transparent, i.e. the jobs number on Friday, but the data related to this amount of dark fleet activity is beyond opaque.
Yeah, and the dark arts of tracking them, it's very, very tricky. I mean, you need satellite data, you need vessel tracking data like at Windward, you need to have some sort of dark fleet list so you know which vessels to look out for. And then, of course, some of them, we've got zombie tankers and tankers that have decided to change their name, change their flag. And we're not talking about 10 or 20, we're talking about, several hundred at any one time that you have to really stay on top of. So it does make things very, very difficult, especially looking at China, of course, the world's biggest importers. So those figures can always be looked at, with a degree of, of uncertainty.
Certainly a gentle word. Shoaib, last word to you. Where do we go from here? You're calling that this increase, this sort of second round of increases, we finished the first round, 2.2 million barrel a day. That package is done at the end of September, not quite done yet in terms of just the time frame of it. The new round starts next month, but you're calling it's only going to be a 1 month and done?
I think yes. In my opinion, it could be the last unwinding of the year. As I said, its market is very tough at the moment. Demand is not really strong in the Q4.
But is demand the issue here? Is demand the issue? Because ultimately, if you were talking about demand and price, you wouldn't have done any of the increases through the summer and tolerate $65 oil. Do you think, is there a greater initiative here than demand from the major OPEC producers?
Yeah, it's not about demand, but I think is OPEC members, they just wait and see what will happen, especially what's really happening between the US and Russia. But that really impacting the oil prices, because if any deal, peace deal will be reached between two parties, I think the sanctions will be lifted very soon on Russia. And if they lift sanctions, it means that it will allow Russia to pump more oil to the market. And India and China.
I'm not sure that they could pump more oil, but let's just stay focused on your neck of the woods. What does this mean for Algeria and other OPEC producers? Brent crude oil at $65 a barrel. And as we're reporting here today from Singapore, the consensus here is that we're going weaker. What does that mean for the fiscal health of countries like Algeria and other oil-producing countries? What sort of duress will they be put under without, we're in 6 months of oil in the 60s?
To be honest, this is not preferred price for most of the OPEC members. This is not the price they are expecting. So they are cutting oil prices. They are cutting oil just to recover, to see better oil prices. But the reality, $165, $66, it's not really the ideal, and it's not the perfect prices most of the OPEC members they are looking for. So I think, as I said, this is very tough moments, and I think the best thing is just to wait and see what will really happen. And
it's even tough for Saudi Arabia, and they have got a $600-700 billion sovereign wealth fund, whereas the countries like Algeria and others, they don't have that kind of reserve. So it'll be interesting to see what the pain threshold of OPEC Plus is over the coming months, given that most countries, very few have the luxury of a big sovereign wealth fund. We're going to have to leave it there. Brent crude oil trading a little bit up today on the news that OPEC Plus increase yesterday was which is a little bit. nothing like this month. For example, in September, OPEC Plus is increasing 500,000 barrels a day. Next month, it's only 100 and a bit, and it's probably much less than that. So markets rallying on it not being as bad or not as much new supply coming. But will OPEC Plus do what they did last time? Go with a soft little increase in the first month, and then bang, in month two, it's a triple. Whereas Shoaib is calling no, that'll be one and done. Last time it wasn't one and done. Last time it was one and then a triple. And then they went even bigger than a triple. We're going to have to wait and see. Well, I suppose a lot will depend on how the market reacts. If the market supports the move, then maybe they'll go again. Shoaib, thank you so much as always. Absolutely wonderful to have you on the show. Michelle, great to have you, and look forward to hosting you guys in Fujairah in a few weeks' time. Omar Najia, Monday Morning Quarterback, thank you so much for your time this morning. Take care. Have a great week. All the best from Singapore.
Thank you,
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.